Jake Morrison sat in his chair and watched the alien delegates argue about his people. The big chamber was full of noise, as 47 different species talked over each other. Some clicked their mandibles, others made wet gurgling sounds, and a few spoke through electronic boxes that turned their thoughts into words humans could understand. Jake looked calm, but inside he felt tired. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years. He had seen this coming for months. The other species were getting angry at humans for helping smaller worlds that were being attacked by pirates and raiders. The humans have gone too far this time, said Prime Minister Zexdale. He was tall and made of what looked like living crystal. When he got angry, his body glowed brighter. They sent their warships to help the people of Kepler Prime without asking us first. Council Speaker Velanara moved her tentacles in what Jake knew meant she was annoyed. She was the leader of this meeting and came from a species that looked like giant purple octopuses. The motion we are voting on today is simple, she said. We want to remove humanity from the Galactic Council because they keep breaking our rules about not getting involved in other people's wars. Jake stood up slowly. His simple gray suit looked boring next to all the fancy clothes and weird body shapes around him. Before you vote, he said in a quiet voice, I want you to think about what you are about to lose. The chamber got loud again. Many aliens made sounds that meant they were laughing at him. Senator Mordick, from the gas world Nephis, floated in his special tank and bubbled something that translated as human arrogance, as usual. Admiral Felden from the core worlds banged his forearms on his desk. Humans think they are so special. We managed fine before you showed up 50 years ago. Jake felt Senator Lisa Bell put her hand on his shoulder. Lisa was Earth's military person on the council. She was younger than Jake and still believed they could change alien minds with good arguments. Don't bother, Jake, she whispered. They decided weeks ago. This vote is just for show. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. He saw species that humans had helped build hospitals for. He saw others that humans had saved from asteroid impacts. He saw the delegates from worlds where human engineers had built water treatment plants and power stations. None of them would look at him now. Fine, Jake said. He sat back down and waited. The vote took 2 hours, because each species wanted to make a speech about how dangerous and violent humans were. They talked about human military ships being too powerful. They complained that humans always wanted to help weak species, instead of letting stronger ones take what they wanted. They said humans were too emotional and made decisions too quickly. Finally, Velanara called for the actual vote. All those in favor of removing humanity from the Galactic Council. 46 tentacles, claws, appendages and electronic signals went up. Only the human delegation did not vote. The motion passes, Velanara announced. Humanity is no longer welcome in Council space. All human ships and citizens must leave within 30 days. Jake picked up his simple briefcase. He had brought the same one to every council meeting for 12 years. Lisa gathered up her electronic tablet and the few papers they had brought. Neither of them looked upset or angry. They just seemed tired. Ambassador Morrison Velanara called out as they reached the big doors. Do you have anything to say? Any final words? Jake stopped and turned around. The chamber had gone quiet. All those aliens were waiting for him to beg or threaten or make some dramatic speech like they always did in their own cultures. Good luck, Jake said. Then he and Lisa walked out. The news reached Earth in less than an hour through the quantum communication network that humans had helped build. President Katie Johnson was in a meeting with her cabinet when the message came in. She read it twice, then looked at her advisors. Well, she said, I guess that settles it. Defense Secretary Bob Wilson leaned forward. We could fight this. Our fleet is stronger than any 3 of their species combined. No, President Johnson said firmly. We're not going to war over this. Send out the Exodus protocol to all our ships and stations. The Exodus Protocol was something human leaders had hoped they would never need to use. It was a plan to withdraw every human presence from Council space if they were ever kicked out, or if relations broke down completely. Every human captain, every station commander, every colony governor had a sealed copy of the orders. Admiral Pete Johnson got the message on his flagship, New Horizon, as it patrolled the border between Council space and the dangerous wild zone where pirates liked to hide. He was not related to the president, but they had known each other since military academy. Amy, he called to his communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Clark. Send the following message to all human vessels, stations, and colonies. Authentication code Omega-77. Amy's fingers moved quickly over her console. Message. Ready, sir. Execute Exodus Protocol immediately. No explanations. No goodbyes. Complete withdrawal from all Council territories within 72 hours. Destroy all sensitive technology that cannot be moved. Leave no strategic assets behind. This is not a drill. Amy hesitated for just a second. Sir, that's going to leave a lot of alien civilians in bad situations. The colonies we protect, the research stations we help run, the trade routes we patrol. Pete looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. Not our problem anymore, Amy. Send the message. The message went out on channels that only humans knew about. Within minutes, every human ship captain and colony leader in Council space was reading the same orders. There were no arguments, no debates, no requests for clarification. Humans had learned long ago that when you were not wanted somewhere, the best thing to do was leave quickly and completely. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Foreman, Ron Martinez, was checking the morning extraction reports when his communicator beeped with the special tone that meant emergency orders from Earth. He read the message 3 times, then walked to his office window. Outside, he could see the massive mining equipment that had been pulling rare metals from the planet's core for 10 years. Alien workers from 6 different species were starting their shifts. Computer, he said, begin emergency shutdown of all mining operations. Authorization, Martinez 77 Alpha. Shutdown will result in loss of 3 months of extracted materials, the computer warned. Confirmed shutdown. Confirmed. And activate data wipe protocols for all human-designed systems. Ron packed his few personal things and walked outside. His alien assistant Clickstar scurried over on 6 legs. The bug-like Vrillix was always excited about something. Boss Ron, the computers are all shutting down. Is this some kind of maintenance? Ron handed Clickstar a datapad with basic operation instructions. I'm leaving, Clicks. You're in charge now. Leaving. Where are you going? When will you be back? Ron could see the human transport ship landing at the spaceport in the distance. I won't be back. Good luck with everything. He walked away while Clickstar called after him with questions he would not answer. The withdrawal started exactly at midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Across hundreds of worlds and space stations, humans began packing their things and leaving. They did not explain why. They did not say goodbye. They just left. Captain Helen Ross landed her transport ship on Kepler 4, for to be just as Ron Martinez finished shutting down the mining equipment. The massive machines that had been working day and night for 10 years went silent, one by one. Warning lights started flashing as automated systems tried to figure out what was wrong. How long do we have? Ron asked as he climbed aboard the transport. 60 hours, until the last pickup, Helen replied. Orders are to leave nothing useful behind. Outside the transport windows, they could see alien workers running around in panic. The Vrilex and Aquarian miners had never operated the deep core without human help. They knew how to run the simple surface equipment, but the big machines that went down into the planet's hot center were too complicated. Clickstar was banging on the transport's hull with his 6 arms. Boss Ron, the thermal regulators are overheating. The pressure systems are failing. We need help. Ron looked out at the alien who had worked beside him for 5 years. Clickstar was smart and hard-working, but he did not understand how the deep mining systems connected to each other. None of the aliens did. They had been happy to let humans handle the complicated stuff while they did the easier jobs. "Sorry, Clicks," Ron said quietly. The transport lifted off and headed for space. Similar scenes were happening all over the galaxy. On the medical research world of Sanctuary, Dr. Carl Baker was packing up his laboratory. He had spent 15 years studying diseases that affected multiple alien species. His research had saved millions of lives. Dr. Desick, his lizard-like assistant, watched him seal up all his data files with human encryption codes. "Carl, you cannot leave now. The Vega plague is spreading to new worlds every day. Without your research, we cannot stop it." Carl handed Desick a basic datapad with simple treatment information. "This has enough to keep people alive for a while. You'll figure out the rest. But your synthesis methods, your cross-species immunity research, the genetic mapping protocols, we need all of it." Carl picked up his personal bag and walked toward the exit. The council decided they don't need humans anymore. That includes human research. This is different. People are dying. Carl stopped at the door. For a moment, his calm expression cracked, and Nessick could see how much this hurt him. People die in wars too. The council didn't seem to care about that when they kicked us out. On the trade station orbiting Vega Prime, station manager Danny Cole was shutting down the main computer systems that controlled cargo handling for half the sector. The station processed goods from 30 different worlds and sent them to 300 others. It was one of the busiest trade hubs in council space. "Danny, what are you doing?" asked Port Director Velmuth, a floating jellyfish-like creature, who had worked with Danny for 8 years. "We have 60 cargo ships waiting to dock." "Not my problem anymore," Danny said, wiping the navigation computers and shipping databases. "The council wanted us gone, but the shipping schedules, the cargo manifests, the route optimizations, those are all human systems. We don't know how to run them." Danny sealed his personal belongings in a travel case. "You'll learn, or you won't. Either way, it's not my job to worry about it." The most shocking withdrawal was happening in the neutral zone. For 20 years, human peacekeepers had kept the peace between the Confederation and the Theocracy. The two groups of species hated each other and had been fighting on and off for centuries before humans arrived to stop the violence. Commander Nick Stone stood on the bridge of his patrol ship Defender as it left the border station for the last time. Behind them, the station's lights were going dark as human personnel evacuated. The alien civilians who lived there were gathering in the main plaza, looking confused and scared. "Sir," said Major Julie Parker, his second in command, "we're getting distress calls from 17 different worlds. They want to know why we're abandoning our posts." Nick watched the scanner as Confederation and Theocracy ships began moving toward the border. Without human patrols to watch them, both sides were already preparing to grab territory. "Tell them to ask the council." "But sir, there are 3 million civilians in this sector who depend on our protection. The refugee camps, the mixed colonies, the trade settlements. Without us here, they're defenseless." "Major, let me explain something to you," Nick said calmly. "The council voted unanimously to throw us out. 46 different species stood up and said humans were too violent and dangerous to be trusted. Well, now they get to see what real violence looks like without us around to stop it." Julie looked at the tactical display, where red warning markers were popping up as hostile ships moved into the area. "This is going to be a massacre." "Yes, it is. And every drop of blood spilled is on the council's hands, not ours." On Earth, President Katie Johnson was getting reports from all over human space. The evacuation was going perfectly. No human had been left behind. No useful technology had fallen into alien hands. No strategic positions remained in human control. "Ma'am?" said her chief of staff. "We're getting thousands of messages from alien governments begging us to reconsider. They're offering to pay us to stay." "Too late for that," the president replied. "They made their choice." Secretary of State Mary Adams looked worried. "Some of these situations are really bad, Katie. The medical research, the peacekeeping missions, the trade networks. Millions of aliens are going to suffer without our help." "Then maybe they should have thought about that before they kicked us out," President Johnson said firmly. "We offered partnership. They chose prejudice instead." The alien reactions were getting more desperate by the hour. On Kepler 4-4b, the mining operation was in complete chaos. Without human oversight, the Vrilics and Aquarian workers had tried to restart the deep core extractors on their own. They had managed to turn the machines on but had no idea how to balance the thermal controls and seismic dampeners. 3 hours after the humans left, the first major accident happened. A thermal explosion deep underground sent shockwaves through the entire mining complex. Half the surface installations collapsed. The remaining workers evacuated in panic, leaving billions of credits worth of equipment buried under rubble. On Sanctuary, the medical crisis was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Without Dr. Carl Baker's research team, the other scientists could not continue the advanced work on the Vega plague. They tried to use the basic treatment protocols he had left behind, but those only worked for the early stages of the disease. Dr. Vesic sent desperate messages to every human medical facility he could contact, but they all came back with the same response: access denied. Contact the Galactic Council for assistance. In the neutral zone, Commander Stone's prediction was proving correct. 6 hours after the last human patrol ship left, Confederation forces attacked a Theocracy outpost. The Theocracy responded by bombing a Confederation supply depot. Within 12 hours, both sides had mobilized their full fleets. The war that humans had prevented for 20 years was finally starting. And this time, there would be no peacekeepers to stop it before it spread to every world in the region. 3 weeks after the humans left, everything started falling apart. The problems were small at first, but they got bigger every day. What had seemed like minor inconveniences quickly became major disasters that no one knew how to fix. On Kepler 4-2b, the mining disaster had grown worse. The underground explosion had triggered a chain reaction that collapsed most of the tunnel systems. Clickstar and the other surviving workers stood outside the ruined facility and stared at the smoking holes where the entrances used to be. The rare earth metals that powered half the galaxy's technology were now buried under millions of tons of rock. "Can we dig them out?" asked Morgix, one of the Aquarian supervisors. His blue skin had turned pale green, which meant he was scared. Clicktor's 6 eyes all focused on the destruction. "The metals are there, but we cannot reach them." The humans had special machines for deep mining. They also had the knowledge to make the tunnels safe. We only knew how to operate the surface equipment. The planetary governor, a proud son named Velkos, had arrived that morning to survey the damage. He had been one of the aliens who celebrated when the humans were kicked out of the council. Now he was not celebrating anymore. "How long to rebuild?" he demanded. "Governor, we do not know how to rebuild," Clickstar replied honestly. The deep core mining systems were designed by human engineers. The safety protocols, the thermal management, the seismic controls, it was all human technology. We were just the manual labor. Velkos felt his stomach drop. This single mining operation produced 60% of the rare earth metals used in council space. Without it, every piece of advanced technology would eventually stop working. Starships, computers, medical equipment, communication systems, all of it depended on those metals. The medical situation was getting even worse. The Vega plague had now spread to over 50 worlds, and the death count was rising every day. Dr. Vesic had tried everything he could think of, but the basic treatment protocols that Dr. Carl Baker had left behind were not enough. The human approach was completely different from ours. the sec explained to the Council's Emergency Medical Committee. We treat each symptom separately. They treated the whole body as one connected system. Without understanding their methods, we are just guessing. Committee Chairman Mordeth floated in his tank and bubbled anxiously. Surely their research notes contain the information we need. The research files are encrypted with human quantum codes. Even if we could break the encryption, which would take years, the data is written in human scientific notation that we do not fully understand. They used mathematical concepts that our species never developed. On the border world of Nexus 7, the war between the Confederation and the Theocracy had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. What started as small raids had become full-scale battles involving hundreds of ships. General Kraktis of the Confederation stood in his command center and watched the tactical display with growing concern. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked. His aide, 47 destroyed, 31 damaged beyond repair, Lieutenant Vexstar reported. "The Theocracy has lost similar numbers, but we are winning, correct?" "Sir, we are not winning. Neither side is winning. We are just destroying each other." The human peacekeepers used to prevent these battles by negotiating before the shooting started. They also provided neutral ground for talks. Without them, we can only fight. General Kraktis had been a military leader for 30 years, but he was discovering that fighting a war was much harder than he expected. The humans had always handled the complicated parts, supply line management, communication between different species, command systems, tactical coordination. Now that his forces had to do everything themselves, nothing worked properly. On the trade station, orbiting Vega Prime, Port Director Velmuth was watching his life's work fall apart. Without the human-designed cargo management systems, the station could only handle about 20% of its normal traffic. Ships were backed up for days waiting to dock. Some captains had given up and taken their cargo elsewhere. "The shipping routes are breaking down across the entire sector," reported his assistant, a nervous Trilix named Kik. Without the human navigation computers and route optimization algorithms, most cargo ships cannot figure out efficient paths between worlds. Transport costs have tripled. Velmuth's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. He had not slept properly in weeks. "What about the other trade stations? Can they pick up the overflow?" "Sir, they are having the same problems we are. The humans designed most of the major trade infrastructure in council space. Without them to maintain and operate it, the entire economic system is failing." The crisis was spreading to places no one had expected. On the research world of New Athens, scientists from different species who had worked together for decades were suddenly unable to collaborate. Dr. Yelenex, a hegemony researcher, tried to explain the problem to his colleagues. "The humans were our translators," he said. "Not just for language, but for concepts and methods. My species thinks in mathematical terms. The Aquarians think in fluid dynamics. The Virilex think in structural engineering. Humans were the only ones who could understand all our different approaches and help us combine them into unified projects." Professor Telmodu, a elderly Centaurian, nodded sadly. "I never realized how much we depended on them. They seemed so simple compared to our advanced civilizations. But they had something we do not have, the ability to see connections between things that appear unrelated." Back on Kepler 4 for to be, the situation had gotten much worse. The mining disaster had destabilized the planet's geological structure. Without the human-designed seismic dampeners to absorb underground shockwaves, earthquakes were now happening every few days. The few remaining mining facilities were shutting down as the ground became too unstable to work on. Governor Velkos received a report that made his worst fears come true. The planet's main city, New Sparta, was built on a geological fault line that had been stable for centuries thanks to human seismic management systems. Now that those systems were failing, the entire city was at risk. "Evacuate the city," he ordered his emergency coordinator. "Sir, that is 3 million people. Where will they go?" I do not know. But if we do not move them, they will all die when the fault line shifts. Council Speaker Velanara sat in her private office and reviewed damage reports from across council space. The numbers were getting worse every day. Economic collapse on 78 worlds, medical crisis affecting 300 systems, active, warfare in the former neutral zone, infrastructure failures in every major trade hub. Her assistant, a young hegemony diplomat named Ziltar, brought her the latest casualty reports from the Confederation Theocracy War. Ma'am, the death toll has reached 200,000. Both sides are requesting council intervention to stop the fighting. With what? Velanara asked bitterly. Our peacekeeping forces use human-designed ships with human tactical systems. Half our military commanders trained under human officers. We cannot even coordinate our own fleets properly, much less stop a war between two other powers. The most disturbing reports were coming from worlds that most people had forgotten about. Small colonies and research stations that humans had quietly supported were now sending desperate pleas for help. Food shipments that humans had arranged were not arriving. Medical supplies that human logistics networks had delivered were running out. Communication relays that human technicians had maintained were going offline. Dr. Maya Singh, the only human left in council space, was brought to Velanara's office for another consultation. Maya looked tired and sad as she read through the damage reports. This is worse than I expected, Maya admitted. I knew there would be problems, but I did not realize how deeply integrated humans had become in your civilization. Can you contact Earth? Velanara asked desperately. Can you ask them to reconsider? Maya shook her head slowly. Speaker, you do not understand human psychology. When we are rejected, we do not argue or beg. We accept it and move on. Earth has probably already started making new plans that do not include any of you. But surely when they see the suffering their departure has caused, they will feel bad about it, Maya interrupted. But they will not change their minds. You told them unanimously that humanity had no place in your community. They believed you. 2 months after the humans left, the galaxy was dying. The words seemed too strong at first, but every day brought new proof that it was true. Civilizations that had existed for thousands of years were crumbling because they had forgotten how to do things that humans had quietly handled for decades. Council Speaker Velanara called an emergency meeting, but even organizing it was nearly impossible. The communication systems that connected different worlds were failing. The humans had built most of the relay stations and maintained the complex protocols that let different plus species talk to each other across vast distances. Half the council members cannot even receive our messages, reported Communications Director Thelvis, a spider-like arachnoid whose 8 arms moved frantically over his control panels. The quantum relay network is breaking down without human technicians to maintain it. Those council members who could still communicate were not bringing good news. Ambassador Zextal's crystal body had lost most of its glow and was covered in stress fractures. His species' home system was facing complete economic collapse. Our manufacturing centers have shut down, he reported in a voice much quieter than his usual booming tone. We cannot get the rare earth metals from Kepler-44 to be. Without them, we cannot build the components that power our cities, our ships, our life support systems. Senator Mordick floated in his tank, but the gas inside was a sickly yellow color, instead of his usual bright blue. My world has lost 60% of its population to the Vega plague. We tried to continue the human research, but we do not understand their methods. Every treatment we attempt makes the disease stronger. Admiral Felden looked older than his 150 years. His 4 arms moved slowly as he gestured to the tactical display. The war in the neutral zone has spread to 12 systems. Both the Confederation and the Theocracy are demanding that we stop the other side, but our own fleets cannot work together. Human officers used to coordinate joint operations between our different military systems. Without them, we cannot even communicate properly during battles. Velenara's tentacles curled in distress as she listened to report after report. The galaxy was not just losing the humans, it was losing the ability to function as a connected civilization. What about the human woman, Dr. Singh? Can she help us understand how to fix these problems? We asked her to examine our communication systems, Thelvis replied. She looked at them for one day and told us it would take her 20 years to rebuild what humans had created over 50 years. She also said she would need a team of human engineers and technicians to help her, and she is the only human left in council space. The worst news came from worlds that had seemed stable just weeks earlier. On the agricultural planet Harvest Prime, the food distribution networks had collapsed completely. The planet produced enough food to feed 50 worlds, but without human logistics coordination. Most of it was rotting in storage, while distant planets starved. Governor Killenth sent a desperate message to the council. We have tried to deliver food to the famine zones, but we do not know how to calculate shipping routes efficiently. Our cargo ships are using 3 times as much fuel as they should, and taking twice as long to reach their destinations. Many are getting lost entirely. The medical crisis had spread far beyond the Vega plague. On Sanctuary, Dr. Vesic was dealing with the breakdown of the entire interspecies medical system. Each alien species had different biology, and treating patients from multiple species required knowledge that apparently only humans possessed. A Vrilix patient died yesterday because I gave him medicine that works for Aquarius, Vesic reported to the Medical Emergency Committee. The human doctors somehow knew which treatments worked for which species, and how to modify them for mixed populations. I thought this knowledge was simple, but it turns out to involve incredibly complex understanding of biochemistry that we never learned. The committee was meeting in a hospital that was running out of basic supplies. Medical equipment that humans had designed and maintained was breaking down. Medicines that human laboratories had produced were no longer available. Even simple procedures were becoming dangerous because the hospitals had been built to human safety standards that other species did not fully understand. Dr. Yulthera, the hospital's chief administrator, delivered the most frightening news of all. We are not just losing patients to disease. We are losing the ability to practice modern medicine. Our equipment, our procedures, our understanding of cross-species biology. It was all dependent on human knowledge that we never bothered to learn ourselves. On the research world of New Athens, the breakdown of scientific cooperation had stopped nearly all advanced research. Professor Thelmodo stood in his empty laboratory and explained the problem to a council investigative team. Each species is very smart in our own areas, he said. The hegemony understands energy physics. The Centaurians know stellar mechanics. The Aquarians are experts in fluid dynamics. But humans were the only ones who could take all our different knowledge and combine it into new discoveries. The investigative team leader, a Trilix named Vexnari, looked confused. But surely you can continue your research in your own fields. That is what we thought, Professor Thelmodo replied sadly. But it turns out that most modern science requires knowledge from many different fields. We cannot study new energy sources without understanding stellar mechanics and fluid dynamics and materials science and quantum physics. Humans were the only ones who understood enough about all our different specialties to see how they connected. The economic collapse was accelerating. Trade between worlds had dropped by 70%. Because the complex shipping networks that humans had managed were too complicated for other species to operate. Entire industries were shutting down because they could not get the materials they needed from other worlds. On the industrial world of Forge 7, factory manager Kilvoth watched his assembly lines go silent one by one. We built starship engines here, he explained to the economic disaster assessment team. But our raw materials came from 6 different worlds, and our finished products went to 20 others. The humans managed all the scheduling and logistics. Without them, we cannot coordinate the supply chains. The factory had employed 50,000 workers from 8 different species. Now most of them were unemployed because the complex systems that kept modern industry running had collapsed without human oversight. Even worse was the discovery that humans had been quietly preventing conflicts that no one else even knew about. Border disputes, trade disagreements, cultural misunderstandings. Humans had been mediating and solving problems before they became serious enough for the Council to notice. Ambassador Zilmora of the Outer Rim brought disturbing news to the emergency session. 3 minor wars have started in our region since the humans left. We did not even know there were tensions between those species. Apparently, human diplomats were handling dozens of small disputes that would have escalated into violence without their intervention. Council Speaker Velinara realized that her worst fears were coming true. The galaxy was not just losing human technology and knowledge, it was losing the peace and stability that humans had quietly maintained for decades. How many species are considering leaving the Council? She asked her chief aide. 17 so. Farziltar replied grimly. They say that membership is useless if we cannot solve any of the current crises. Some are talking about forming their own regional alliances. The Galactic Council, which had existed for over 1,000 years, was falling apart just 2 months after voting to expel humanity. 6 months after the human departure, the Galactic Council was no longer really governing anything. Half the member species had withdrawn to deal with their own collapsing civilizations. The other half could barely communicate with each other, because the relay networks were failing faster than anyone could repair them. Council. Speaker Velinara sat alone in the vast chamber where 47 species had once debated the future of the galaxy. Now only 12 species still sent representatives, and they rarely agreed on anything. Without humans to translate not just languages but concepts and ideas between very different ways of thinking. The remaining council members found it almost impossible to work together. The latest reports made for grim reading. The Vega plague had killed over 50 million beings across 300 worlds. The war between the Confederation and the Theocracy had expanded into the largest galactic conflict in recorded history. The economic collapse had reduced trade between worlds to levels not seen in centuries. But perhaps worse than the big disasters were the thousands of small failures that kept accumulating every day. Space elevators that humans had maintained were breaking down, stranding entire planets. Weather control systems that human engineers had designed were failing, causing droughts and floods. Even simple things like water treatment plants and power distribution networks were shutting down because no one understood how to maintain the complex systems that humans had built. Dr. Maya Singh received permission to make one final statement to the Council before taking the last human transport ship back to Earth. She stood at the same podium where Ambassador Jake Morrison had said goodbye 6 months earlier. The chamber was mostly empty now, with only a few dozen aliens present, instead of the hundreds who had attended regular sessions in the past. You asked me to explain where you went wrong, Maya began, her voice echoing in the vast space. I have spent 6 months studying your crisis, and I think I finally understand the real problem. The remaining council members leaned forward. After months of disasters, they were desperate for any insight that might help them understand what had happened to their civilization. You treated partnership like a favor you were doing for humans, Maya continued. You thought you were being generous by letting us join your advanced society, but the truth is that humans never saw the council as a privilege or an honor. We saw it as a job that needed to be done. Ambassador Zextile's crystal form was now so dim and cracked that he could barely speak above a whisper. We were the advanced species. We had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even invented writing. Maya nodded sadly. Yes, you were more advanced in many ways. Your technology was more sophisticated. Your civilizations were older. Your knowledge was deeper. but you were also more specialized. Each of your species became very good at one or two things and ignored everything else. She gestured to the empty seats around the chamber. Humans were generalists. We were not the best at any one thing, but we were decent at most things. More importantly, we were curious about everything. When we joined the council, we did not just focus on human interests. We tried to understand how all the different species worked together. Senator Mordek's tank was now filled with brown gas that meant he was slowly dying from stress-related illness. But surely our differences were a strength. Specialization allowed us to achieve great things. Specialization was a strength, Maya agreed. But only as long as someone was managing the connections between all your different specialties. Humans became that someone, usually without you even noticing it. She pulled out a datapad with statistics that painted a picture of systematic collapse. When humans left, you discovered that your civilization was like a machine with a million different parts. Each part worked perfectly, but no one understood how they all fit together. Humans had been the engineers who kept the whole machine running. The few remaining council members sat in stunned silence as Maya's words sank in. They had spent 6 months trying to restart their various systems and restore their networks. But nothing worked because they did not understand the underlying connections that humans had created. Dr. Desick, who had traveled from Sanctuary to attend this final session, spoke up from his medical support chair. He was dying from a strain of the Vega plague that had mutated beyond the simple treatments Dr. Carl Baker had left behind. Could we ask Earth to send advisors? Technical experts who could help us understand the systems? Maya shook her head. Dr. Vesic, I have been trying to contact Earth for months. Their response is always the same. All communication with former council species has been terminated. They are not angry or hostile. They have simply moved on. She paused and looked around the chamber at the aliens, who had once been so proud and confident. You have to understand human psychology. When humans are rejected by a group, we do not spend time hoping that group will change its mind. We find new groups to work with, or we create our own. The truth of this statement was becoming clear from intelligence reports that were filtering in from human space. Earth had not collapsed or struggled after leaving the council. Instead, humans had quickly formed new partnerships with independent species that had never joined the council. They were building new trade networks, establishing new research partnerships, and creating new peacekeeping alliances. The humans are doing fine without us, admitted Admiral Felden, whose military had been reduced to a fraction of its former strength. It is we who are falling apart without them. Council Speaker Velanara made one last desperate attempt. Dr. Singh, is there anything we can do? Any gesture we can make to show humans that we understand our mistake? Maya gathered her belongings and walked toward the chamber exit, following the same path that Jake Morrison had taken 6 months earlier. Speaker Velanara, 46 species voted unanimously to expel humanity from this council. You did not just reject our membership, you rejected our entire approach to cooperation and mutual support. She stopped at the great doors and turned back to face the nearly empty chamber. Even if Earth wanted to restore relations, which they do not, how could humans ever trust you again? How could we believe that you would not vote us out again the next time you disagreed with our methods? The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of failing life support systems and the occasional flicker of malfunctioning lights. The grand civilization that had once ruled the galaxy was slowly shutting down around them. The age of the Galactic Council is ending, Maya said quietly. Not because of war or invasion or natural disaster, but because you chose to reject the one species that was holding your alliance together. You will survive as individual worlds and systems, but you will never again be the united galactic community you once were. She walked through the doors, and they closed behind her with a final, echoing sound. Council Speaker Velanara stared at those doors for a long time. knowing that an entire era of galactic history had just ended. The last entry in the Council's official records was brief. Final session concluded. Insufficient membership to maintain quorum. Council operations suspended indefinitely. May future generations learn from our failure. Outside the Council building, Maya boarded the transport that would take her to the human ship waiting in orbit. As they lifted off, she could see the great city that had once been the center of galactic government. Many of the buildings were already dark. The spaceport was nearly empty. The bustling streets where dozens of species had once conducted business were quiet and abandoned. The galaxy would continue, but it would be a smaller, lonelier place, and somewhere among the distant stars. Humanity was building something new with partners who valued cooperation over pride and mutual benefit over ancient prejudices. The Council had chosen to live without humans. Now they would discover what that choice really meant.